I thank the Chair. Madam Chair, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I'm pleased to begin consideration of H.R. 4660, making appropriations for the fiscal year 2015 for Commerce, Justice, Science, and related agencies. The bill has far-reaching impact from the safety of people in their homes and communities to exploring the farthest reaches of space. The bill before the committee today reflects a delicate balance of needs and requirements. We have drafted what I consider a responsible bill for FY 2015 spending levels for the departments and agencies under the subcommittee's jurisdiction. We have had to carefully prioritize this funding in the bill and make hard choices about how to spend the scarce resources. I want to thank Chairman Rogers for supporting us with a very fair allocation and for helping us to move the bill forward. I also want to thank the subcommittee ranking member, Mr. Fattah, who has been a valued partner and colleague. I appreciate his commitment and his understanding of the wide variety of programs in this bill, and I thank him for his help. I also want to thank all the members of the subcommittee for the help and assistance, and also Mrs. Lowy, the ranking member of the full committee. I want to thank the majority staff for their hard work, Committee Clerk Mike Ringler, Leslie Albright, Jeff Ashford, Diana Simpson, Cullen Samples, and Taylor Kelly. And I appreciate the professionalism and cooperation of the minority staff. In particular, I want to thank Bob Bonner and Matt Smith for their help during all the long hours spent putting this bill and report together. The bill totals $51.2 billion in discretionary spending, a reduction of $398 million, or approximately 1% below current fiscal year. Since the beginning of the 112th Congress, the committee has cut the total amount of the CGS bill by $13.3 billion, or 20% over 5 fiscal years. We have focused limited resources on the most critical areas: fighting crime and terrorism, including a focus on preventing and investigating cyber attacks, and boosting U.S. competitiveness and job creation by investing in exports, manufacturing, science, and space exploration. For the Department of Commerce, the bill includes $8.4 billion, $391 million below the President's request. The bill provides funding above the request for the National Weather Service operations, weather research, and NOAA's 2 flagship weather satellite systems that will result in more timely and accurate warnings and forecasts. Severe weather events often result in the loss of life and economic ruin. We saw this again recently with the devastating tornadoes in Arkansas, Mississippi, and elsewhere. These investments save lives in Arkansas and Mississippi, and they will save lives wherever the next severe weather event strikes. The bill makes critical investments in manufacturing, export promotion, and job creation, including a Commerce Department and task force to incentivize U.S. companies to bring their manufacturing and service activities back to the United States. The bill also includes $856 million for NIST research standards. Their work is critical to innovation and competitiveness, including $130 million for the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program to help advance job growth in the manufacturing sector. It also funds the Cybersecurity Center of Excellence at NIST to work with companies to bolster cybersecurity in the retail sector, and encourages the development of a cyber breach database, especially in light of the attacks on Target and Neiman Marcus that impacted millions of Americans. A primary area of focus in the bill this year is scientific research, innovation, and competitiveness. Investing in basic research is key to growth and job creation and the foundation for the economic security of future generations, and enables us to stay ahead of China. The bill includes $7.4 billion for the National Science Foundation, an increase of $232 million, or 3.2% above FY14 for basic research and science. Despite the constrained allocation, this is an all-time high watermark for the NSF basic research funding that will keep America's economy strong by setting the groundwork for the development of new technologies, again, to stay ahead of, not to be competitive with, but to stay ahead of the People's Republic of China, a communist government. With increased funding comes increased responsibility. I would expect the NSF to follow through on the commitments it has made to the committee to increase accountability and transparency in its grant decision making. No funny grants is what I'm trying to say. The new director must take every necessary step to ensure that research grants are scientifically meritorious and the funding allocations reflect national priorities and the taxpayer investments in science are being used wisely. Developing a well-educated STEM workforce is also critical to American competitiveness. $1 billion is provided throughout the bill for these efforts, including $876 million for NSF programs to improve the quality of science education. For NASA, the bill includes $17.9 billion, including funding above the request to keep the development schedule and flight milestones for the Orion crew vehicle and the Space Launch System, which will provide the capability for the U.S. to return to the Moon and go to Mars. It is also important for the U.S. to end our reliance on Russia for crew access to the International Space Station as soon as possible, which is why commercial crew development is funded at $785 million, with instructions to NASA to find the fastest and safest way to close this gap. The bill also includes an increase of $100 million for aeronautics research, a long overdue boost to this part of NASA's research portfolio. Aerospace is the pillar of the American manufacturing sector and one of our leading exports. This investment will boost our aviation competitiveness and improve airport and air safety. The President's request for NASA science programs would have inhibited progress on planetary science goals, including missions to Mars and Europa. This bill includes $5.2 billion for NASA science, which restores those cuts. The bill also includes important resources to address critical security gaps throughout NASA. As the recent espionage case further demonstrated, countries like China are engaged in an unprecedented effort to steal cutting-edge technology from U.S. labs and companies. This includes the groundbreaking space and aeronautics research done at NASA every day. We need to make sure we're doing everything possible to prevent the theft or unauthorized disclosure of this technology. Last year, the committee's direction to the National Academy of Public Administration, led by former Attorney General Dick Thornburgh, conducted an external review that found troubling vulnerabilities in NASA's security controls and practices. They found NASA systems were compromised and a troubling culture throughout the agency that failed to prioritize or enforce security. Funding is included in this bill for NASA to protect its cutting-edge technologies with improved IT security, export control training, additional counterintelligence staffing, and the operation of a new foreign national access management program. The bill also calls for NAPA to submit a follow-up report by the end of FY15 on NASA's progress in implementing the recommended improvements. The committee will continue to hold NASA accountable for the implementation of these security provisions. Justice. For the Department of Justice, the bill includes $27.8 billion and $384 million above the current level. The top mission priority of the Justice Department is defending national security from both internal and external threats. The bill includes $8.5 billion, an increase of $125 million for the FBI, including funds to prevent and combat cyber intrusions, which Director Comey believes may overtake terrorism as the #1 threat facing the nation. Every major company in the United States has now been hit by the Chinese with cyber attacks. Many members of Congress have had their computers stripped by the Chinese. The FBI continues to build a nationwide capability for cyber investigations. Last week, Justice, for the first time, charged 5 officers of China's People's Liberation Army with economic cyber espionage, the first time foreign state actors have been so charged. I commend the administration, but as having served in the Army and been a private never did anything a sergeant didn't tell him to do. The sergeant didn't do anything the lieutenant told him to do. The lieutenant didn't do anything to the major, and right up to the commander-in-chief. And so this is not just 5 low-level Chinese officers. It goes to the highest level of the Chinese government. This case is an example of the great work the men and women of the FBI are doing with those investments in this bill over the last several years to confront cyber attacks, and we thank the FBI. These efforts are necessary to stop the plundering of America's innovation, jobs, and trade secrets. The FBI is also at the forefront of the effort to combat violent gangs. This bill increases funding for Safe Street task forces to check this growing problem and better support state and local law enforcement efforts to deal with gang networks in their communities. The bill also includes $8.5 million for the National Gang Intelligence Center and gives the center a new name, an additional mission to provide and coordinate intelligence on human trafficking networks nationwide and to disseminate that intelligence to law enforcement partners. The Bureau of Prisons is responsible for custody and care of more than 215,000 federal offenders in 119 institutions nationwide. The bill includes $7 billion to ensure the safe and secure operation of the federal prison system. The bill continues funding for the Chuck Colson Task Force on Federal Corrections. Chuck Colson dedicated his life when he got out of prison to reform the prisons, and we have named this Prison Reform Commission after Chuck Colson, which will recommend reforms to increase public safety, improve offender accountability, and reduce recidivism and control costs in the federal prison system. This effort will distill lessons learned from innovations at the state level. Many states are farther ahead. Texas is farther ahead. Many others farther ahead than Federal Bureau of Prisons, and enable these reforms to take hold in the federal system and in correction system nationwide. The bill also directs the Justice Department Office of Victims of Crime to provide the survivors and families of the victims of the November 2009 attack at Fort Hood all possible and appropriate assistance. We're going to help the victims of Fort Hood and their families. And we're going to require the office to report to Congress, quote, what, if any, role the classification of the attack as a workplace violence incident rather than a terrorist attack played on in determining what types of assistance would be provided. Alakwi was in touch with the major when he shot them. If you look at the emails, it said this was a terrorist attack. It was not workplace violence. The bill also includes a number of important provisions in support of Second Amendment rights, including a new provision prohibiting the implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty by executive order or otherwise. The bill also includes $2.1 billion for justice grant programs to support states, localities, and nonprofits. This is a reduction of $73 million from the current level. In fact, since 2009, these programs have been reduced by 49%, and I know we're going to get amendments here complaining, but we had an allocation, and we had to work within that allocation. Despite the reduction, the bill provides proven high-priority programs, including burn justice assistance grants, state criminal alien assistance, violence against women programs, human trafficking grants, and DNA backlog reductions. This is a significant bill for reducing violence against women and providing services to victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. The bill includes $425.5 million for these programs, more than the current level and more than the President's request. In this bill is more than the current level and more than the administration's request. Also, the bill triples the current level for human trafficking task forces and victim services. We are determined to make a difference, to bring an end to the heinous crime that is happening not only in other countries, but right here in the United States. So we triple the current level, not just talk, not just rhetoric or words, but we triple the amount, and every FBI office is involved, every U.S. attorney has to have a task force to see if we can actually end this, perhaps the same way that William Wilberforce ended the slave trade in England. It also directs the Attorney General to hold a national conference on sex trafficking with governor, every U.S. attorney, federal, state, and local law enforcement to evaluate and elevate the awareness and share the very best practice. So what's going on in Texas can be done in Virginia. What's going on in Pennsylvania can be done somewhere else. But this national conference, they'll all be together with the idea of ending this. The unacceptable backlog of DNA tests at crime labs and law enforcement agencies demands action. The bill includes $125 million for existing DNA programs, an additional $36 million to address the backlog of sexual assault kits at law enforcement agencies nationwide. The bill includes funding for prescription drug monitoring, thanks to Chairman Rogers, and also a significant increase for the DEA's tactical diversion squads to address our nation's fastest-growing drug problem, prescription drug abuse. Finally, after the Virginia Tech shooting in 2007, Congress passed a bill to improve the National Instant Background Check System, NICS, a critical tool for keeping firearms out of the hands of prohibited persons. But NICS is only effective as a state database on which it relies. The bill for the second straight year includes funding above the request for grants to states. It's above, to improve NIC's record. This bill includes $58.8 million, an increase of 6% above the President's request, and $40 million above the FY13 level. The bill also includes $2 million for the National Center for Campus Public Safety, which the committee established with the support of the Virginia Family Foundation. This center serves as a clearinghouse for the dissemination of information and best practices. There was no money requested for this, but we wanted to fund it. Additionally, the bill includes $75 million for the Comprehensive School Safety Initiative. The National Institute of Justice will study the role of mental health, as well as exposure to violent videos, some of these violent video games, some of the violent movies, in school violence at the K through 12 level. The initiative also provides pilot grants to test effective mental health interventions at schools across the nation. NSF is also active in the area. They are currently seeking proposals for research that will enable better understanding of the factors, causes, and consequences of youth violence. This is a summary of the bill. It requires the increases that were necessary, the cuts that were necessary, carries on the fight against terrorism, cyber attacks, crime, trafficking in persons, violence against women, and provides important increases to boost scientific research, innovation, and competitiveness. Provides strong support for the various NASA missions and contains the effort to improve weather forecasting accuracy. It represents our best take on matching needs with scarce resources. We've tried hard to produce the best bill possible we could within the resources we had to work with that, and I urge all members to support it, and I maintain the balance of time.